Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and acting anyway. It's the decision to act and then following through while fear rides right behind you. The voice of fear doesn't get silenced. You just stop letting it drive. So the real question isn't whether you're afraid. Of course you are. We all are. The real question is, what do you care about enough that you'll act anyway? That's what will lead to courage. And this courage is what's required for fulfillment in life.
Welcome to Beyond Success, the podcast for high achievers seeking deeper meaning, fulfillment, and purpose. Now, here's your host, world-renowned leadership coach and therapist, Tian, Ph.D.
What's the cost of always avoiding what scares you? Not just the obvious stuff like missed promotions or staying single longer than you'd like. I'm talking about the deeper cost, the erosion of your confidence, the way your world slowly shrinks because fear quietly decides what's possible for you. I had a client in his mid-40s, a director at a big multinational, who never once gave his superiors or colleagues direct feedback, even when he saw major problems. He told himself he was being professional or strategic, but really he was terrified of confrontation. The cost was that projects kept failing in predictable ways. His team lost respect for him. Inside, he hated himself for staying quiet, and he was stuck at director level, while his peers who came up with him were being promoted to VP. In dating, I've seen the same sort of thing. Guys who want intimacy but never confess how they actually feel. They keep things casual, not because that's what they really want, but because they're scared of rejection. On the surface, they try to look confident, funny, charming, social, but behind the scenes, they're alone, wondering why nothing ever feels real or authentic. That's the cost of avoiding fear. Your career stalls, your relationships stay shallow, and your sense of self-worth erodes. Now, if you've been following this miniseries, we've been exploring the link between morality and fulfillment. We started with the big question, why be good? And the answer we landed on was actually simple, because it leads to a better life, in every sense. Then we dug into integrity, living with congruence between the inner and the outer, and between the different parts inside you. But here's the thing, integrity only holds if you have the courage to stand by it, especially when it costs something. It's one thing to know your values, to even live them when no one else is watching, but the real test comes when your values collide with your fear. That's when you find out what kind of person you really are. And that's where courage comes in. Courage isn't about being fearless. Fearlessness is often just recklessness. Real courage is acting while fear screams at you to run. It's standing your ground in a meeting when every instinct tells you to stay quiet. It's telling someone else the truth, knowing it might disappoint them. It's opening your heart to love when rejection feels unbearable. Courage is what makes integrity possible in the real world. And without courage, fulfillment is always out of reach, because fulfillment requires growth, intimacy, contribution, all things that demand courage. So in this episode, we're going to explore what courage really is, how it connects to fulfillment, and how to start cultivating it in your daily life. I'm Tian. I'm a Brown University certified leadership and performance coach and a certified IFS therapy practitioner. For almost the past 2 decades, I've been helping hundreds of thousands of people from over 87 countries find fulfillment, meaning, and success in their personal and professional lives. And in this episode, I've got 3 main points here, and this is the first. Courage is one of those words that everyone nods along with, but few actually stop to define. So let's get clear. Moral courage is the capacity to act in spite of fear, or especially fear of social or emotional risk. And not just physical danger, though that matters too, of course. The fears that hold most people back today aren't tigers in the jungle. They're much quieter, like the fear of rejection, or the fear of failure, or the fear of losing approval. The fear that if you show up as you really are, you'll be judged or left behind and abandoned. Courage is not recklessness. It's not bravado or pretending that you're fearless. Recklessness is charging ahead without considering the consequences. Bravado is like a performance, a mask to hide the fear underneath. Courage is different. Courage feels the fear, counts the cost, and then acts anyway. Because the value at stake matters more than the comfort of avoiding risk. Aristotle had a phrase for this. He said, courage is the mean between cowardice and rashness. Too much fear and you never move. Too little fear and you become reckless or careless or destructive. Courage is the balance. It's action in proportion to what the situation demands, guided by reason and by values. Ancient Chinese philosophers captured this too. In Confucian and Taoist thought, courage, or yong, wasn't about being a reckless fighter. It wasn't about charging into battle without hesitation. It was about moral clarity in action. Doing what's right, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs you. Courage wasn't measured by how loudly you shouted or how many blows you could take, but instead by whether you acted in harmony or alignment with justice, integrity, and compassion, even, or especially, when fear presses in. Modern psychology reframes the same lesson. The dangers have changed shape, but the challenge is the same. We fear rejection or failure, loss of status, loss of belonging. For ambitious professionals and high achievers, these fears are often the ones that paralyze them. You avoid asking for a raise because you fear being labeled arrogant. You avoid telling your partner the truth because you fear they'll walk away. You avoid admitting you don't know something because you fear looking weak or stupid. And ironically, by trying to protect yourself from those outcomes, you guarantee a worse result. The relationship you never risk honesty in stays shallow. The job you never speak up in stays stagnant. The confidence you never act on withers into self-doubt. I see this in dating all the time. A guy wants to tell a woman he likes her, but he hedges instead. Makes jokes, plays it cool. He's terrified of putting his heart on the line, so he never gets the intimacy that he actually craves. In leadership, it shows up when managers avoid giving honest feedback. They let projects drift because saying what's true might upset someone, or they sugarcoat decisions to avoid looking bad. The result? Stagnant teams, wasted resources, and a leader who's respected less and less over time. So courage is the hinge. Without it, integrity collapses. You can know your values in theory, but if you never stand by them, especially when it costs you, then they just stay abstract. Courage is what turns your values into lived reality. It's what unlocks new territory of growth, deeper intimacy, creative expression, true leadership. And courage is not an optional virtue. It's the one that makes all the others possible. Without courage, compassion becomes sentimentality. Integrity becomes mere theory. Justice becomes wishful thinking. With courage, those virtues gain teeth. They move from ideas into actual action. The irony is that most of us think we need to eliminate fear before we can act with courage. But courage, by definition, can only exist with fear. So you can't wait for the fear to disappear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and acting anyway. It's the decision to act and then following through while fear rides right behind you. The voice of fear doesn't get silenced. You just stop letting it drive. So the real question isn't whether you're afraid. Of course you are. We all are. The real question is, what do you care about enough that you'll act anyway? That's what will lead to courage. And this courage is what's required for fulfillment in life. Now on to the second point. Courage is the bridge between the life you're living now and the life you really want. Without it, every area of your life starts to shrink. But with it, doors open that you didn't even know were there. Let's start with growth. Courage is the gateway to new breakthroughs in life. If you've ever set a boundary in a relationship, told someone no, even when it terrified you, then you know how much strength that takes. If you've ever shared something vulnerable, knowing it might not be received well, that's courage too. If you've ever put your creative work out into the world, risking criticism, that's courage too. Without courage, your life shrinks into a smaller and smaller safe zone. You only date the people who won't reject you. You only take jobs that won't stretch you. You only speak up when you already know the room will agree with you. And after a while, you realize you're not growing anymore. You're stuck, you're stagnant, you're plateauing, and then you decline. And then you just repeat the same safe loops. Here's the harder truth. That shrinking doesn't actually protect you. It suffocates you. Avoiding fear might feel safe in the short term, but it costs you long-term fulfillment. Because fulfillment isn't comfort. It requires expansion. It's intimacy. It's connection. And every one of those requires courage. Now let's bring in what I see every week in my therapy and coaching work. In IFS therapy, we talk about protective parts. These are the parts of you that step in to keep you safe, like the part that makes you procrastinate, or the part that shuts down in conflict, or the part that lashes out when someone gets too close. These parts usually got their jobs early in life, when fear was overwhelming you. Back then, they protected you, but now, as an adult, they're maladaptive. They keep you from taking risks, from opening up, from trusting others. And the key is that those fears can't be bypassed. You can't just think your way out of them. You can't suppress them forever. Healing only happens when you face the fear with courage. The protective part needs to see that you can survive the risk now, that you can tolerate the discomfort. Courage is what makes unburdening and integration possible. Without courage, those parts stay frozen in time. With courage, they are able to soften, and they're able to start trusting you, and your inner system can then come into harmony. This is why true maturity is about integration, not avoidance. When you avoid, you stay fragmented. One part wants intimacy, another part sabotages it. Or one part wants leadership, and another hides in silence. Facing fear honestly brings those parts back into alignment. You can finally move as one coherent self, instead of a fractured collection of competing impulses and inner conflicts. Jonathan Haidt, one of the leading researchers in moral psychology, points out that happiness isn't just about pleasure. It's also moral. We feel good when we act in ways that align with our core values. Courage feeds this directly. Acting in line with your values, even or especially under pressure, reduces internal conflict. You're not constantly fighting yourself. It builds trust because people know where you stand. And it lowers stress because you're no longer burning energy covering up your fear. And here's the blunt truth. If you keep avoiding the scary stuff, like confessing your feelings or standing up to your boss or being honest about what you want, you are basically guaranteeing mediocrity. Mediocre relationships, mediocre leadership, a mediocre life. You'll always be waiting for permission to live instead of actually living and thriving.
Many high achievers struggle when it comes to managing their emotions or navigating their relationships, and they hit a wall when it comes to emotional mastery. Maybe you've noticed that stress, frustration, or anger is seeping into your personal or professional life, or you feel disconnected from those you care about. That's where David Tian's Emotional Mastery Program comes in. It's based on peer-reviewed, evidence-backed therapeutic methods to help you find happiness, love, and real fulfillment. Learn how to break free from the emotional roller coaster and start thriving in every area of your life. You can find out more at davidtianphd.com/emotional mastery. That's DAVIDTIAN.PhD.com/emotional mastery.
That might sound harsh, but it's real. Most of the people who come to me for coaching aren't lacking intelligence or resources. They're paralyzed by fear, and they don't even know it. And their lives reflect it. They settle. They play small. They call it being realistic. But what it really is cowardice dressed up as prudence. Let me give you two examples. First, in dating, I worked with a guy in his late 20s who had no problems getting dates. He was successful, articulate, well put together, but every relationship that he tried to get into stalled at an early point. Okay, why? It was because he was terrified of saying what he actually really wanted, which was a deeper committed relationship. He tried to play it cool, staying non-committal, letting things just happen. And every woman that he dated eventually moved on, frustrated that he never had the courage to show up with honesty. Once he faced that fear that he didn't even know about, Once he had the courage to risk rejection by saying, here's what I actually want, then everything in his dating life changed. He started building relationships that had real depth. Now, in the area of leadership, a client of mine many years ago was a mid-level executive at a big company. He was a smart guy, was good at execution, but he always avoided conflict. He never gave his team direct feedback. He danced around underperformance, hoping it would just magically improve on its own. His team saw this, and their trust in him eroded. When he finally mustered up the courage to sit down with these people and have the tough conversations, it turned out productivity went up. Morale improved. He got their trust because they saw that he had the courage to hold them accountable, and he started being seen as a true leader. Courage isn't just some abstract virtue. It's a practice. Every time you act in spite of fear, you expand your whole life. Every time you avoid fear, you shrink your life. That executive I mentioned, after he finally had one hard conversation, he had deep restorative sleep through the night for the first time in months. That client who confessed his fear or vulnerability, he walked away from that conversation feeling lighter, even before she responded, because he finally respected himself. So ask yourself, what are the fears that run your life right now? Where are you letting fear decide what's possible for you? Because fulfillment lives on the other side of those fears, not in avoiding them, not in numbing them, but in facing them head on with courage. And that's where the door to growth, intimacy, and true leadership opens. And now the third and final point, if you want to build courage, it helps to stop thinking of it as a single heroic act and start thinking of it as daily training. Just like building strength, it's not one dramatic lift that makes you strong. It's progressive overload, consistent reps. The first and biggest step is mapping your fears. This is where the work goes deeper than fake it till you make it. In IFS therapy, we recognize that our fears are carried by protective parts of us. These parts aren't stupid. They developed because they believe they're keeping us safe. Maybe one part keeps you quiet in meetings so that you won't risk humiliation. Maybe another part makes you keep your dates surface level so that you won't have to risk rejection. Maybe another part pushes you to work nonstop so you'll never have to slow down enough to face loneliness. To map your fears, you journal or sit quietly in meditation and reflect. Ask the part you're focusing on, if this part stopped doing its job, what's the catastrophe it's afraid would happen? Write it out in that part's own voice. Let that part say to you, if I don't keep you quiet, you'll be humiliated like you were back in school at this particular time. Or maybe the part will say, if I don't keep you from opening up, you'll get abandoned again, remember, at this time back then? Whatever it reveals to you, sit with it. And then ask, when and where do these fears show up the most now in your life? Is it conflict? Or asking for what you really want? Or setting a healthy boundary? Patterns will begin to emerge. Then, as a sub-step, from the perspective of your higher self, ask, how realistic are these fears now? Maybe they were real when you were 12, but are they real today? And then ask the key question, does giving in to these fears actually lead to a more fulfilling life? Usually the answer is no. So the final step is asking, how could I withstand or come to terms with the negative consequence this part is so afraid of? And if the worst happens, if I'm rejected, or if I lose approval, or if someone gets angry, could I handle it? If not, how can I grow into the kind of person who could? Naming that possibility begins to break fear's power over you. As with all of these steps, but especially this big first one, I highly recommend getting professional guidance from an experienced, certified IFS practitioner. Okay, once you've mapped your fears, you can move to the next big step. Step 2, incremental exposure. This is where psychology meets the gym. Cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy both emphasize progressive overload. Don't start by trying to confront your CEO right away or spilling your childhood trauma all over your first date. Instead, start small. Tell someone an honest no, even if you still feel guilty. Admit when you don't know something in a meeting. Or speak up with one true comment that you would normally hold back. These frequent or daily reps retrain your nervous system. Gradually, what once spiked your anxiety becomes tolerable, and then over time, eventually even natural. I had a client who was terrified of public speaking. Instead of forcing him to speak on a big stage right away, we first started with him sharing one vulnerable sentence in a small group. And the next week, it was a few vulnerable sentences strung together. A few months later, he was leading team updates at work. It wasn't one heroic act, it was daily progressive overload, fear by fear. Step 3. Accountability partners. Courage grows in community. The eminent Yale sociology professor Nicholas Christakis' research on social contagion shows that emotions and behaviors spread through social networks naturally and automatically. Courage, like cowardice, is contagious. If your peer group always plays it safe, you will too, naturally. If your peers challenge each other to take risks, you'll find yourself braver without even trying. That's why mutual courage challenges with trusted peers can be so effective. You share what scares you, you both commit to action, and you hold each other accountable. The right peer group lifts you higher and faster and more naturally than you'd ever go alone. I've seen this firsthand in my own coaching groups. Someone admits they're scared to set a healthy boundary with a partner or confront a colleague, and another member challenges them to do it by next week. And they come back, share what happened, and suddenly everyone else has more courage too. That's the power of the group. Finally, step 4, daily reflection. At the end of each day, ask 2 simple questions. Where did fear hold me back today? And where did I act with courage? Write it down. This builds awareness. It also builds self-respect and self-trust and self-esteem. When you track your small, courageous acts, you start to see yourself differently. You begin to trust yourself. I had one client of mine ending every day with writing down one moment of courage. Sometimes it was tiny, like admitting he was wrong about a report. Other days it was huge, like ending a relationship that no longer aligned with his values. After several months, he had hundreds of entries, and when he doubted himself, he had proof on paper. He was braver than he realized. Courage isn't built in the abstract, it's built in daily practice. Mapping fears, facing them in small ways, sharing the journey with others, reflecting each night. These aren't like glamorous steps. They don't look like Hollywood bravery, but they're what build the kind of courage that makes fulfillment possible. Because fulfillment isn't about avoiding fear. It comes from facing your fears to give you the freedom to live your life to the fullest. So, to sum up, courage is not optional. It's required. Without it, integrity collapses under pressure. And without integrity, fulfillment never takes root. But with courage, your world will expand, your relationships deepen, your leadership grows, and your inner life finally starts to feel aligned, instead of at war with yourself. And here's the question I want to leave you with. Where are you letting fear decide for you right now? Maybe it's in your dating life, avoiding the conversation you know you need to have. Maybe it's in your career, staying silent when you really should speak up. Maybe it's in your personal growth, ignoring the part of you that's been asking for change because change feels too risky. What would your life look like if you faced that fear head on? Not waiting for it to disappear, not waiting until you felt ready, but acting even while fear shouted at you to back down. What would open up for you then? Because courage is the turning point. It's what separates living a life of safety from living a life of meaning. And while safety feels comfortable, it's courage that leads to fulfillment. Next time, we're going to explore compassion, because courage without compassion can harden into arrogance or worse, aggression. Compassion is what completes the circle. It's what keeps courage from becoming self-serving, transforms it into connection. And connection's not optional. It's a universal and healthy human need. Without it, even the bravest among us will still feel empty. So join me in the next episode where we'll dig into compassion, not as pity, not as weakness, but as a strength that allows us to connect meaningfully, lead responsibly, and love deeply. Thank you so much for listening. If this has helped you in any way, please share it with anyone else that you think could benefit from it. If you liked it, hit a like or give it a good rating on whatever platform you're listening to this on. If you have any feedback whatsoever, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment, send me a message. I'd love to get your feedback. Thank you again so much for listening. I look forward to welcoming you to the next episode. Until then, David Tian, signing out.